coming up. We have an extra. What does this have to be by the last?
That sounds right. Yes.
You are live. I just gonna do an audio check.
Yeah, the 31st, yeah. That is-
You're not making a file electronically?
I don't know, I printed mine out, I didn't know that was even an option, I had to get 10 signatures.
I know that.
You are good, sir.
Just double check for me, go to the, when you get a moment, so that you don't end up doing work that you do.
I think a bunch of people in here.
Talk about it today. And some of the counties have gone to all electronic. So
It's usually not good when you get that many people.
yeah.
Somebody that.
And you are live and unmuted.
Very good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for July tonight. We're going to call the order at 6:34. Do a quick reading of the open public meeting statement. We'll do the pledge of allegiance. Get right to work. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies, at which time any business affecting their interests is discussed and acted upon. In accordance with these provisions and the Board of Education Policy 0162, the Board of Education of the Borough of Bound Brook has closed notice of this meeting to be posted to the board office at Bound Brook High School and mailed more facts to the Courier News, Bound Brook Borough Clerk, South Bound Brook Board of Education, and any person who has requested individual notice and paid the required fee. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Gorski, roll call, please.
Certainly. Mr. Bell.
Here.
Mr. Dawson. Here. Ms. Casino. Ms. Lima. Here. Mr. Zupko. Ms. Pusin.
Here.
Mr. Minhas. Ms. Hyde.
Here.
Mr. Bowman.
Here.
And Mrs. Mendoza.
Here.
We have a quorum present.
Thank you, sir. In service of all the good work that we're continuing to do in terms of our own commitment to continuing education, I'm happy to welcome Ms. Gwen Thornton back to Bound Brook. She's going to take us through some training on student achievement tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in Bound Brook.
You wanna move down, is that better?
Where do you want me to move?
And I can see you.
I can see, but I don't know. Joanne, can you see?
Okay.
Okay,
Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Good to go.
Well, perfect. So I point in coming tonight is really to talk about measuring student achievement, what it looks like, what you're responsible for, what the board's role is, why looking at data, for example, is so critically important, the various kinds of data you may use to look at student achievement, and how you can use that to improve student achievement over time. So why is it important? There are a number of assessments and there are a number of data points that boards of education can look at. Number one, the New Jersey Student Learning Assessments. Those are required assessments that are given to students once a year. We had some time off due to COVID, but they were given again this year. There are all kinds of ways of measuring data, and you can look, for example, to see how your district is doing on the New Jersey School Performance Reports. Every single district has a series of school performance reports that are posted every year, and it looks at each school individually, and there's a summary of the overall district as well. And that's someplace you can look at various kinds of data in addition to those standardized types of assessments that are given in the school. At the high school level, obviously, there are all the PSATs, SATs, ACTs that are given, which are also standardized assessments that can be looked at to see how your students are doing. And that's another way to look at it. We know through research that boards that use data have higher levels of student achievement because it's a way to measure how well you're doing. And if you can identify through the utilization of that data and assessing that data where there are gaps, for example, it's very important that you then can use that information to help remediate and close those gaps for students. You can identify where there has been perhaps a loss of learning or where a student hasn't been able to come to terms with that. So you have to be cognizant of data, you should use it, but the one thing that I can't overemphasize is making sure that you're using data as a flashlight and not a hammer. Data should be used to help inform and improve, not to punish, penalize, or disrupt, okay? And all too often, sometimes districts, board members may use data in a way that is not productive for the district. You need to use it to help inform the instructional program, to help your staff identify where they may need to do some professional development to become more adept at the instructional techniques that they're using. But again, you want to make sure that you're using it as a flashlight to highlight where it is you may need to place additional focus and emphasis in your instructional program, but you don't want to use it as a hammer. And that's something that, oftentimes, sometimes superintendents get a little leery of sharing data because sometimes if it's not understood in the context in which it's meant to be used, it can be detrimental. Okay? So having reliable data makes sure and helps you to have policies that reflect student achievement. It helps you to measure what your goals are for your students. It's a means, though, of holding everyone accountable for how well we're doing and where we need to improve further. But again, it should be used in a positive vein, not otherwise. Provide opportunities to celebrate success. Where are we doing particularly well? And let's make sure that we know that we're doing well in a particular area. It also removes and depersonalizes decisions that may need to be made because it's based on hard quantifiable data. It's not my opinion or your opinion. It is what the data shows us needs to be done. And so it can help depersonalize those decisions sometimes. And that's helpful, especially with dealing with staff. It helps you to make informed decisions around your budget, where the needs are, because it makes it very clear where there may need to be curriculum revisions or additional courses offered, for example. It makes it abundantly clear. It's a way of involving the community to say, here's where we are, here's where we're trying to go. We need you to help us, and here's how you can help us, and making sure that they understand that as well. It helps to evaluate the effectiveness of your policies and your programs. Keep in mind that you can't measure the success of a curriculum initiative in 1 year. It takes time. There's professional development involved. Students have to get accustomed to it. Staff has to get accustomed to it. So know that sometimes you have to look at data. You can't analyze the new curriculum at the end of the first year and say, oh, that was a disaster, or, oh, it was a wonderful success, because you have to look at it over time to fairly measure its success, okay? It will help you to identify both the challenges and possible solutions to it, okay? Two different types of data that you need to look at. Most of what I've just talked about is quantifiable data that can be measured. It's hard data. People like to talk about it as being hard data, whereas qualitative data is thought to be, quote, soft data or softer data. That doesn't mean it's anecdotes, right? It's other kinds of measurements of things beyond academic skills that are important for 21st century learning and important for our students to be able to do, okay? So that kind of qualitative data comes from gathering one-on-one interviews, focus groups, surveys, or general observation over time. But it's not my saying, well, let me tell you how my daughter did in Mrs. Smith's class. That's an anecdote, right? It's true for my child, but it doesn't make it true universally. And it's not a large sampling. It's one person's opinion. And you can't just go on that, which is not to say that my opinion isn't infinitely valuable to you. However, for Mrs. Smith, it probably has nothing to do with reality, okay? So, what are the different kinds of assessments and data you're going to look at? There are learned reference tests, there are criterion reference tests, performance-based tests, achievement tests versus aptitude. Achievement measures what you've learned, aptitude measures potential to learn, for example, okay? Disaggregated data with the coming of No Child Left Behind, which was the first real federal foray beyond the IDEA, which preceded NCLB, No Child Left Behind, was the very first time the districts were required to disaggregate data, to take the data and separate it by gender, English language learners, low socioeconomic groups, all kinds of different classifications of students, to better be able to identify if there were certain folks who perhaps from lack of opportunity to access courses, perhaps. It may be, for example, that the assessments were being given in English, and if English is not your first language, obviously much more difficult. I just tell this anecdote all the time because it makes me laugh. I picked up one of my children from a high school exam. It was Spanish that day. I said, well, how'd the exam go? She said, well, Mom, it wasn't in English. Okay. That's from an English speaker. So think how kids whose first language is not English would feel taking an entire battery of assessments on a regular basis. It can be challenging. Looking at longitudinal data of a child over time so that you can see the growth and development and measure the progress is something that is very helpful. And until this aggregated data was put into place by No Child Left Behind, I was a board member that No Child Left Behind didn't exist. And we would get the scores and we'd look at them and we'd say, oh, 93% of the students achieved proficiency on whatever particular assessment there was in those days, because we had a multitude of different assessments through the years. And we all felt really accomplished until someone said to me, that's great, except for if you're the parents of one of that 7% of kids who's not proficient. So, and no one ever said, you need to look at every child, but that is the point. And now we have the Every Child Success Act, ESSA, which followed No Child Left Behind. It's really the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which has very specific requirements around it the same way No Child Left Behind did. And it does require you to disaggregate data, and they've actually expanded the number of subgroups that you have to measure. Now, some districts don't have enough population, and in New Jersey, our group number for disaggregating data, last time I checked, was 20 students. It was interesting because if you compare states and rate states based on their education, for example, with No Child Left Behind, the N number for the subgroups, right, that you had to measure, in Florida, for example, when it was started, was 100 kids. Well, based on that, you don't have to do very much division, and it makes your district look much better in many ways on some of those standardized assessments. But New Jersey, who's always been number 1 or 2 in the country for education, trading with Massachusetts typically on and off through the years, has an in-group of only 20. So, and that says we're paying attention to every child, which is something I think all of you should be very pleased about. There are formative assessments, which show what you may know now, but don't know completely, and summative assessments that are given, for example, at the end of a unit. So you might give a formative, think of that as a pretest. You would be taught and instructed on the material, and then you would take a summative assessment, which it shows what you know and what you have learned over time. So those are the kinds of assessments that are given. Formative and summative assessments are routinely given by teachers in their classrooms in order to see where students are. The beauty of those kinds of assessments is that you can then remediate right away. One of the difficulties with the standardized assessments is they generally come back. The delay between taking the assessment and having the return, it is too far apart to enable teachers to go back and immediately correct any kind of misunderstanding or help a child who may have missed a salient point somewhere along the road. When they developed the PARCC assessments, which predated the New Jersey Student Learning Assessments, and some people refer to NJSLA, the New Jersey, as PARCC Light. I'm not commenting on that, but nonetheless, they promised districts that they would have the results back from PARCC in 2 weeks. I was so excited as a former educator. I'll get it back. I would be able to then go into my classroom with my kids, and I would be able to, remediate and accelerate those kids who are already ahead and remediate those kids who may have missed some things. And it never happened, not once, not anywhere. And so that's one of the challenges of the standardized assessments is you get the data back, but you don't get it back in live time during the course of a school year. You can use that data, hopefully, for moving students forward and placing them in the subsequent years' classrooms, depending upon how you do your students, but it's not really helpful in terms of the immediacy, which would be much better, okay? You also know we have New Jersey Achieve teacher evaluation models, and now some of their evaluation is tied to SGOs, student growth objectives, or SGPs, student growth pieces. That's something that, again, is another measurement that's determined by the teacher in collaboration with their principal or their department chair or supervisor, whoever is working with the teachers on that. And so you can then look at student growth percentiles as a whole to see how a whole cohort of kids, like all of 4th grade or all of 5th grade, is moving along that continuum. So other kinds of performance indicators that are quantifiable in some way, but also qualitative, that you might want to look at: graduation rates, post-graduation college enrollment rates, and persistence in college. We now have that. We're now measuring that as well. It's one thing to get into school, but how long do you stay in school? Do you have that persistence to continue and move toward graduation? Looking at your co-curricular participation rates. If you're trying to look at your school culture and climate, looking at your co-curricular participation rates is one of the ways that you could look at it and say, are we engaging our kids? Are they here after school? Are they engaged beyond the classroom? Which we know those kids who tend to be involved in co-curricular activities tend to have higher levels of student achievement. And it doesn't have to be athletics. It can be mock trial. It could be the debate club. It can be any drama group. It can be any number of things, whatever engages kids. Looking at your HIB rates, suspension and expulsions, again, another way of looking at how are we doing in terms of a climate? How are we doing in terms of supporting students' mental health and ensuring, particularly now that we're with the turn to COVID, that we're not having discipline issues. Looking at your students and staff attendance rates. If your students and staff attendance rates are in the 90s, it probably means your district is a good place to be, okay? Staff want to be there, students want to be there, and they're there on a regular basis. That kind of data is very helpful in looking at how's our staff morale? How do we know what that looks like? Well, one of the ways you can measure that, I have districts where 40 to 50% absentee rate among staff. That interferes with the continuity of instruction. So no matter how good your program is, right, that you have in place, the curriculum, if students and staff aren't there, they can't learn. So those are some of the kinds of things. Looking at community service participation rates. Some districts have mandatory community service Most districts don't have mandatory. So looking at that as well is another way of saying, how well are we doing with having students understand the importance of giving back to their community, of being empathetic, giving individuals, all kinds of character traits that parents and educators would love to have in their students. So those are some of the kinds of things that you can look at. Again, your school performance reports are loaded with data. You can look at the number of faculty to students. You can look at the amount of technology, or mostly now all districts are one-to-one, so it's probably less important today than it was pre-COVID, but that used to be a number that you could look at to see how much technology your district had versus another district. And so those are things. You can look at the number of students in AP classes, for example, or IB if you have International Baccalaureate. Those are other measures to look at, how are our high achieving students doing, the number of students that take AP and IB classes. And one of the things I would caution all of you about is that, data, numbers don't lie, people do, okay? And one of the things sometimes the boards of education will do is to say, we really want to have our district higher up on some survey that's out there, right? Some national survey, US News and World Report, New Jersey Magazine. I was doing district goal setting once in a district, and one of their goals that they wanted to achieve was to increase the number of students who took AP tests. So I started to write the goal for them, and I said, okay, the number of students who achieve a 3, 4, or 5, and they said, no, Gwen, that's not what we want. So what do you mean that's not what we want? Just want to increase the number of students that takes a test. And I said, that doesn't make any sense to me as an educator. And one of the board members was actually an assistant superintendent, and it's now a current superintendent. And I said, you know that doesn't tell you anything. And the board member said, oh, yes, it does, because in New Jersey Magazine, you get higher rankings one of the criteria was the number of students who took an AP assessment. Didn't matter if they got a 1 or a 2. It just mattered that they sat for the assessment, which also, by the way, costs money, right? So that is a limiting factor there for kids, at least in those days. So you have to really look at some of those and see what metrics those organizations are using to make those determinations before you decide that this is, the end all to be all, and we have to be number 1 on this, or we need to improve on that. You have to really look carefully at what metrics, what data they're looking at to achieve that, because sometimes they pick funky data that made no sense. You didn't get any college credit if you didn't score a 3, 4, or 5, mostly a 4 or 5. It just didn't do anything. It didn't say you learned anything. Now, I'm assuming they all learned something, but it didn't show that. So you have to really be careful about those metrics. So one of the things you need to think about, what matters most in your community, because what you measure is what matters, right? And that's important to know. So if you highlight something as being important enough to measure as a district internally, I'm not talking about because the school performance reports will be the school performance reports, but what matters here, right? Having that discussion. Is it class sizes, having reasonable class sizes? In some districts, that's a huge piece that's really important to look at class sizes across the district. We know that students tend to do better in smaller class sizes, especially at the early primary levels, like pre-K to 3rd grade, right? When you're doing those foundational skills, that smaller class sizes lead to greater levels of student achievement. So thinking about that. School safety and security. I don't think that even merits my talking about it beyond to say you have to do everything that you possibly can to put into place those measures that will keep your students safe and secure as best we all can in these days. Teacher qualifications, okay? Are all of your teachers teaching in their certificated areas? Or some of them teaching outside of their certificated areas? Sometimes you have to get staff that are, have emergency certs. Are they working to become permanently certified in that particular area? I understand we have teacher shortages, particularly in specific areas, bilingual education, special education. Those are tough higher level mathematics courses, physics, somebody who's dual certified in Mandarin Chinese and physics AP can probably write their own ticket. There aren't a lot of those folks out there. I don't know of any in the state, but it would be a good thing to have. Looking at your course offerings, do you have enough CTE programs, career and technical education programs, to offer alternate pathways to all of your students? So looking at that data, how many kids are in that area where perhaps you're offering dual enrollment and offering college credit to kids at the same time they're in high school, they're also gaining college credits, which long-term economically is a win for parents and students, less college debt, and hopefully will increase college persistence when they're not worrying about the cost as much. Again, some folks, look at the percentage of students who have A's and B's or are honors students, and that may be really important. Again, students in computers, are you one-to-one? Are you not one-to-one? Most districts now, are one-to-one. Student satisfaction, how do you measure that? Well, you can survey them. Students would probably fall over if they were surveyed and really asked, what is it you like best? What do you like least? What would make things better? Looking at your per pupil spending. This is a number that's really important to look at. Again, different schools within a school district can have different needs dependent upon the demographic composition of students within a school. And I know in my district, when I sat on the board, we were so delighted when we could finally say, every one of our 10 elementary schools, here's the per pupil amount for each of these kids in all 10 schools. Aren't we doing a great job? And the answer was, no, we weren't really, because there were schools that had greater numbers of economically disadvantaged students, greater numbers of students where English was not their first language. The PTO, where my kids went to school, could earn $30,000 in a gift wrap sale. That wasn't necessarily true for every school across the district. And so making sure that you were providing equitable amounts of spending per student in order to enable each child to reach his or her potential should really be the benchmark. So looking at it in that light, not just we're giving $21.17 per child for supply. That's not going to help, okay? Parent involvement. We know that having greater community and public engagement in a school district, again, leads to higher levels of student achievement. When parents are involved, understand the needs of their children, want their children, and every guardian wants their child to succeed, but if they're engaged with the district and connected in some way, they are more likely to have successful children. So how do you foster that? How do you measure that? Well, look at the number of programs that you offer through the PTA, PTOs. Do you have PTOs, PTAs, or homeschool associations, whichever, within each of your buildings? Are they well attended? Are they running activities that support students' education, field days, the kinds of things that PTOs, PTAs, HSAs do? All of those things you need to think about in your district. What's really the most critical pieces for you to focus on in terms of looking at the data and measure that so that you know, because what you're looking to see. Keep in mind also that there are some pieces of data there's a correlation but not a direct causation. So typically, if your high school graduation rate goes up, the dropout rate generally is decreasing. And if the high school graduation rate is decreasing, the dropout rate might be increasing. Doesn't mean they're directly related, absolutely, but there's correlation there. So what's causing that, and then how do we fix it? So not looking at any one number in isolation, but looking at various types of pieces together is most helpful. And again, using that data to help inform and improve, okay? So, putting it in charts probably so that you can see patterns is most helpful. A lot of districts have gone to using data dashboards with actually red, yellow, and green as aligned to the stoplights that are out there is a really helpful way and helpful also for your community to be able to look at that data and understand it more clearly. Because everyone knows red means stop, right? This is an area of concern. Yellow is, we're doing better, but we're not where we need to be. And green is we're hitting the mark where we want to be in whatever set of data points you're looking at. And so that's a very helpful way to do it. Again, looking at that disaggregated data in different categories to see who's achieving and who's not. And then making sure you're using your resources appropriately to bring up those kids who aren't. You know, for a while on the No Child Left Behind, when you had to make adequate yearly progress, one of the things that districts did was to look at kids who were on the cusp. And they called them cusp kids, right? And those kids who needed just a little push to get to proficient. So instead of worrying about the kids who were not proficient at all, they looked at those students who were partially proficient and worked to push them over the top, rather than have your district be a district in need of improvement because of the penalties that were implicit in No Child Left Behind. I understand the methodology, I understand the logic, given the times of doing that, but I will tell you that that's not a sound educational utilization of data, right? Because you need to look at those kids who are in greatest need and make sure you're moving not just the kids who are on the cusp up, but every child along the continuum. It's much harder too, if a child is proficient, to move them into advanced proficient, right? But you need to push those kids as well, right? Everyone needs that push to achieve their full potential. Looking at trends in data year over year is helpful as well, because again, new programming and initiative takes time to really come to full fruition. And so looking at data just in a single year may not give you a full picture of what's going on in your district. So looking at it over time is very helpful. Again, you know, one of the things the state did for a very brief period of time was they identified, I think it was only done 1 or 2 years, in the school performance reports, which that's what they're called now. They used to be called the school report cards. They identified districts that were comparable to you. Now, that could mean in Bound Brook that you were being compared to a district in Bergen County and in a district down in South Jersey that you never heard of. No one was ever able to put it in logic to where they came up with those comparable districts, because you're not Bergen County and you're not Salem County. It never made any sense. They eliminated that, fortunately. However, we all have that notion that somehow we need to compare ourselves to the district next to us, the district down the road from us. And what I would tell you is that every district is unique, and you need to focus on what you need to do for your kids. And it's not about comparing yourselves to the district next door or one county over. And fortunately, I think the state finally woke up and said, no, that really didn't make much sense. I had board members calling me saying, where the heck is Lumberton? You know, places they had never heard of, Lower Alloways Creek. They had no idea. And so it became really just crazy. They gave that up, fortunately. Okay, so here's one way, because how data is presented matters. And here's one way to do it. Again, proficient is getting there, improved over time, you know, and then are they doing better or worse for an individual child? Okay, in math, this child exceeded the standard, did not improve in one instance, was doing much better than others, but you can color code it for the families so that they can understand it, because sometimes it is Greek to people and they don't know what it is they're reading. Okay? So thinking about whether you're ready to use data, do you regularly review it to see if you are achieving your district goals? Do you understand how to disaggregate data and why that's important? And I'm sure that a lot of you do. Know the difference between the different kinds of tests and what they mean. You know, looking at an aptitude test is not the same thing as looking at an achievement test. Looking for trends in data over time. Again, sometimes it's very difficult. We're impatient. We want kids to grow. We need to make sure we understand we're not making widgets, right? We're educating children. Education is developmental. People come to understandings in different ways over different times. I waited 12 years to get mathematics. It took more than that to get there. It's developed, and I had a brother that was an engineer. I read the books for him. He helped me with my math. we wouldn't have gotten through school. Education is developmental, and it just takes time, okay? Your superintendent's willingness to share data with the board, okay? That has to happen because you can't know for certain where you are without that hard data, okay? You should discuss that data together and determine and listen to what the programs and the plans are to address those areas where you've identified there may be gaps and may need some additional focus, okay? Using multiple indicators to analyze student performance. And I can't tell you how important that is. Standardized assessments are what? One measure. There are all kinds of ways of measuring student projects. The ability, some people don't take tests well, but if you talk to them and you ask them the same material that's on that assessment, they can give you the right answers, but they may not take tests well. They may be more gifted orally than they are in the written. So having multiple measures of performance over time, and most teachers make an effort and clearly offer those multiple methods for students, whether it's a project, whether it's an oral report, whether it's a presentation to the class, so that there are different ways to measure what students have learned and achieved over time. It's a really important piece to keep in mind. And, if those are things that your board is ready to think about, then certainly using data is important. So how do you use it? Will you review the district data when you do your goal setting? You gather that data, you ask a lot of questions, see if there's any other kinds of data that would be useful that perhaps you haven't thought to include before you make that analysis. Identify the next steps. What do we need to do now? We've identified a gap, or we've identified a strength. How do we get more kids to take this particular class? Because clearly kids are excelling in this area, and we ought to offer that more broadly, right? And then again, it's a whole cycle, and it really mirrors the cycle of goal setting, right? You set your goals, you've spent the year working toward the achievement of those goals, you evaluate it at the end of that year and say, okay, what do we need to do differently? How can we do this better? And use data to help drive those decisions. It's really not so complicated. I've included a glossary in your packet of all of the different kinds of tests, because if you're not an educator, a lot of those terms could be like, what? They go right over the top of your head. And so it's helpful to have that. That's why I've included it. It's not meant to be all inclusive, but it's just meant to help you think about the different kinds of data that are available to you, so that you know what it is that you are looking at, okay? Some of the essential questions to ask. Was the data examined, viewed? Did it identify student weakness? What trends have we identified? What percentage of our students are not meeting those state performance targets? Like it or not, state measures us against those, okay? And so we have to be cognizant of that and work toward improving those. What strategies does the district employ to improve subgroup performance and achievement for students? How will the data be communicated to the community? And here's a really important piece. What training and additional professional development does our staff need in order to be more proficient in the instructional program? Because the single most important component to improving student achievement is the quality of instruction, followed secondly by the culture and climate of the school. So those two pieces in combination, if they're all working together, are going to ensure that your students are successful. And then, are there any curriculum adjustments or revisions that we need to make? Perhaps, we're approaching this from the wrong perspective. Perhaps we need to add a different type of course for students. So thinking about all of those things as a board member and asking those questions, those are all appropriate questions. So, ensuring that you have a vision in place of what students should achieve, have to be able to articulate that, what matters to you as a board and a community that your students have to know and be able to do. And I know they have to have so many Carnegie units, we still have all those credits for graduation. But what's really important is how well prepared are they for the next step in their life, whatever that looks like, whether it's college, career, the military, whatever it is they're going to do, you want to make sure that when they go out these doors, they are well prepared for this world, which continues to change. Ensure that there's a structure, policies and resources to support improvement. making sure that in your budget, you're providing the adequate resources for staffing, for materials. I was just in a district and their budget's in tough shape, and their teachers don't have the resources that they really need for their kids, and it's really sad. Making sure that you're holding yourselves accountable for ensuring that you have those goals in place, that you provided enough resources within the budget, and I know that there are limitations to every district budget, but making sure that those student achievement pieces are funded, okay? Because that is what we're here to do. And making sure that you're advocating for all students in your community. For kids who are high flyers, for kids who are struggling, for those kids in the middle who oftentimes get left in the dust because they're good kids, they don't make a lot of noise, they continue to plow along. They are as important as those kids who are at the top or those kids who are struggling in the tail end. And so making sure you're advocating for all the students in your community is critically important. And that's something that's getting a lot of heat out there, but it really is important to provide equitable access and opportunities for all students. Because in education, equitable means an opportunity. It doesn't mean equal outcomes, but it means equal access to opportunities. And that's what's important, is that we need to provide that for all students all the time. Outcomes may not look the same, but they had an opportunity and they have grown and learned through that opportunity. Okay. How was your role different than the superintendent's? You know, we like to beat you over the head about this. You develop the goals, you say what's important, but the how, that's the responsibility of your administration and professional staff. Action plans are developed by your administration as to how they're going to move from where you are today to where you've identified you want to be at the end of the next school year. Progress, making sure that through the course of the year, we're getting updates and talking about the progress that's being made. Oftentimes, boards don't ask that question, but it's important to know because you can't make a course correction if you need to, if you're not aware of where you are. And so having those updates is important. We talked about having policy and resources. And again, you know, at the end of the year, reviewing, reevaluating, and perhaps revising or recalibrating, however you would like to think of it in those terms. But that's a really important piece to do at the end of every school year. What worked, what didn't work, what do we need to do differently? How can we do this more effectively? How can we be better at the work that we're doing? You hold the superintendent accountable through the superintendent's evaluation. You hold yourselves accountable for your performance on the board self-evaluation. And we've already held all of our students accountable and our staff through evaluations and the students through all kinds of assessments through the course of the year. So you are massively accountable, but you want to make sure that you're using data to make sure you are successful in those efforts. Again, you know, having a planning calendar, and I included in your packet the annual calendar, which I think I've given to you all before, but I continue to give to you, just because I think it helps to structure the board year and help you remember what takes place when. And we've been through all of these things before, but again, you know, having those updates on progress 2 to 3 times a year will help you greatly to know where you are, you know, so that the end of the year shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And you don't want that to happen either. What do you mean we're here? How did we get here? You mean all year we didn't know we were getting here? And that's where we are. So again, it goes to no surprises for either the parents, the community, the staff. We want to have those reviews around the data and to help identify those improvement pieces that you need to have done because they're important to have. So thank you. I mean, this is not meant to be long and complicated. Data can be really helpful. And I know I keep saying this, but because we've seen it go down, seen it gone where it's gone south a couple of times in multiple places, use the data to help inform, to improve instruction, to make things better. It's not meant to be the hammer to penalize people or castigate them, right? You want that data to help kids learn more and do more. Questions that you might have?
So let me just start by saying thank you. It was a really great and informative presentation. I think it was timely. As you went through the calendar, we're about to set our board district goals, you know, for the next year or upcoming meetings. So bringing this back to the front view.
My pleasure. It is wonderful to see all of you. If I don't see you before, I'm counting on seeing some of you at least in October at workshop. It's going to be 4 days this year again, which is very exciting because last year we were back in person for the first time in 2 years, but only for 3 days, and we're back to 4 days. So it will be very worthwhile. There are multiple trainings offered in all kinds of areas. If you've never been and you have an opportunity to go, I would encourage you to do that. We think it's the best program that we offer all year long, and provides you with opportunities for learning and networking with educators and other board members from all across the state of New Jersey. So thank you very much. And if you need anything, you know how to get me. And I'm always around to answer questions and concerns.
Sounds good. Any last questions for Gwen before we let her report?
Well, enjoy the rest of your summer. Hopefully, the sun will shine, the rain will stop soon.
One can only hope.
One can only hope.
Thanks, Gwen.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
I'll be there in a second, Gwen.
So I actually will go back to the first chapter, groundbreaking that you haven't already heard. Dr. Freeman, do you have any information your superintendent's report?
Just the fact that we're very excited about our summer programs. We have a lot of great things going on. We've made adjustments. Part of the adjustment was to make it so that students who were coming for quote-unquote remediation felt that they enjoyed school while still having targeted instruction areas they needed support. And we've been very successful at it so far. The students have been happy. Teachers have been focused on specific standards from the state assessments. And so far, it's been really good. The students have enjoyed it, and we look forward to the continuation.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Freeman. At this point, I'm going to check in with our student board members, see if there's anything we would like to bring to the table this evening.
No.
So we are up to committee reports. First one is education. Mike?
Okay, I have a rather long and detailed report tonight. We had a really great presentation detailing everything that's going on in our summer programs this year. They are very different from last year, so they had a really good PowerPoint presentation for us to show us everything that has changed and how it's working so far. So first, what students are there? We have those who are struggling academically. We have English language learners, we have those with special needs, and we also have kids who are interested in acceleration and enrichment. We have grades K-6 at Smalley, 7 and 8 is taking place at the high school. They have 1 hour of ELA, 1 hour of math, and then at the end of the day, they have 1 hour of STEM, PE, or art, which was added this year, as Dr. Freeman actually just mentioned, because we wanted kids to have more of a sense of fun and not punishment while they're there. They're also planning an end of the summer barbecue to incentivize attendance. And as of our committee meeting, attendance was very good. So I know as someone who's taught summer school that can often be a problem getting kids to attend. So far, things have been really good on that front. They invited for about 45 students per grade, which was much higher than it has been in the past. In previous years, we've only been inviting about 15 to 20 kids per grade, so we're able to include more students. We're able to include kids who are a little more into the middle, from the bottom, from the kids who are struggling towards the middle of the pack, and we got about 30 kids per grade to accept and attend at each grade level. And those are approximate numbers, but again, way up from previous years. We have a lot more kids attending. They're using iReady. Math is using a program called Hand to Mind, which is a hands-on program. ELA is doing novel studies, and in STEM, they're using something called National Inventors Hall of Fame STEM Kits. We also have, in addition to the students who are getting all kinds of benefits from this, we also have teacher leaders on site, and these are people who have administrative certificates or are working towards administrative certificates, so that in addition to helping the students, we're giving them kind of an opportunity to implement the programs that they're learning and the strategies that they're learning to become leaders going forward. So not only are we getting students the experience that they need, but also teachers the experience as well. Okay, so that's who's there. By the way, if I say anything wrong, feel free to jump right in. Okay, so in math, we are focusing, so there was a data presentation, which is amazing. There's this giant chart, and basically they went through every standard and figured out which standards less than 50% of our students are proficient at each grade level, and those are the standards that we're focusing on. So of the students attending, are less than 50% proficient, we're gonna hammer that standard and see at the end of the summer when we give them a partial retake, which I'll explain in a second, how are we doing? Like, did we hit those standards? So every standard has lessons pulled from iReady. They also have mini lessons. And like I said, at the end of the summer, they're gonna each kid will take a partial retake. So they're gonna retake all the questions that they got wrong at the beginning to see after 5 weeks what kind of improvement we will see. So hopefully, I would say at the end of the summer, we'll have that data, and I'm sure there'll be a giant chart again. It'll be amazing. I'm telling you, the data that was presented was unbelievable. It was so well done, so well organized. In ELA, again, we're doing novel studies. We're trying to develop more critical thinking, answering higher level questions, more writing skills, which if you've ever taught ELA or had a child who struggled in ELA, those are the areas that most kids do struggle with, is those higher level thinking skills in language arts. At the high school level, as the state kind of mandates, we are working on credit recovery for those who have to recover credit in order to graduate in the future, on time. So that's more of a state mandated thing. We don't have a lot of control over what we can do there. We also have ESY from, if you don't know what that is, that's extended school year, going on from grades K through 12. That's for special education students who have that in their IEP. They get an extra month of school, and that's going on at Lamont. Okay. I know it's a lot. It is a lot. We also have help with students who, in high school, who took the, GPA, the new graduation test. Those who didn't pass and need to create a portfolio, you may remember that. We have people there helping those students put those portfolios together. Normally, that would be done as a class in the fall, but we had a lot of kids say, let's get it out of the way over the summer. So we have teachers there, which is great because not only does it kind of put those students' minds at ease, but it also helps us with our course load in the fall, reducing maybe a teacher or two from having to, give that class. We can use them somewhere else. And students are on board with it. Again, you see that shift in mindset here, where students are in the summer programs, and many of them are volunteering to be there because they see the benefits. We have, this one's a little crazy for me, even as a math teacher. We also have pre-calc 1 and 2 acceleration classes, which students asked for because they want to get into calculus in the fall, and they asked to take these classes, and many of them are taking both of them this summer, pre-calc 1 and 2. God bless them. That's all I can say. Good for you. I mean, that is wonderful. That is a lot of work to do in the summer, but that's what some students wanted to do that this summer, so we are offering it to them as well. We also have the enrichment camps going on, which have STEM and robotics and art and music. Those are smaller classes. We have teacher leaders there as well. And the last thing we have going on, which will be later in the summer, we'll have our freshman orientation later in the summer, which will be using the Challenge Day program, which promotes things like social awareness and relationship skills and self-management, decision-making. And it's really like how to be a student, how to be a productive member of the school community, things like that. And it's a really good program. So that will be later in the summer. So that was the first presentation. Then Mr. Ross came in and gave us our second presentation.
I have one.
Great, I'm shocked. Go ahead, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay, the question I have is with the portfolio program, how many students are we talking about?
I wish I had that number. I know it was in the presentation. It was a big number. Do you know?
I was just curious.
We'll get it for you.
Yeah. And great presentation. This, thank you.
It was nothing compared to what we saw.
Yeah.
I'm sure not something that would mention.
The only thing that I would add, in addition to just this sheer sheer increasing volume of opportunities that are available with some of these products, really is the idea that many of the techniques and tools that the teachers are using are really a sandbox for things that could be introduced throughout the school year. So this is an opportunity to get some of the staff hands-on with some of these different techniques and have them serve as leaders throughout the teaching community as we look to roll it out. Also, any other questions from Mike on education? You want to roll right into
Let's do it, let's.
I'll give you a break, because I think I have to do the other three, so.
I think governance was much shorter. I can do governance pretty quickly. So the first thing that is on tonight's agenda as a first read, so hopefully you were able to read it, is that our new use of facilities agreement has been updated and it's there for you to read. I would encourage you all to read it before we formally adopt it later, I guess it would be August. But everything is in there. It is comprehensive. It talks about our new tiering system, where we are tiering different entities based on their involvement in the so tier 1 would be district-sponsored activities, and then tier 2 would be things that are associates of Bellbrook schools, like booster clubs and PTOs, and all the way down to a 6th tier, which is for-profit outside organizations. So we work our way through for priority and for fee, and there's a matrix in there that you can see those fees listed in the policy. It includes things like security, damage, custodial fees, insurance. Everything is in there. It was in a previous weekend report, but it's also on tonight's agenda, so you can see it there. Unfortunately, we could not find any record of how much revenue we have produced renting out our facilities in the past, so we don't have a way to anticipate how much revenue this one will generate. So after a good amount, I would say a year, we will revisit that and see if this is something that's going to generate revenue, if it's just something that's going to pay for itself, how we can use it in that way financially. So we're not sure about that yet. Let's see. Okay, the next thing was Gwen, she was just here. Okay. Next, I did email everybody, but I want to double check just in case you didn't see it. You are able to complete the board's self-evaluation now. I did it before I emailed you guys just to see how long it would take. It took me about 45 minutes to get through the whole thing. It's very much like the superintendent evaluation, so you know the format. It's right on the NJSBA website at the bottom on the right-hand side. Click through a few things, use the same username and password that you have used for your superintendent evaluation. Yes.
Would it be reasonable to ask everybody to try and complete that self-evaluation by the end of this month so that we can use the results at our board retreat next month?
Yeah, I actually think in the email I may have said I would write them done by the committees so the first Monday of August, so that we could, in governance, just make sure, Yeah, so same thing, end of July, first Monday of August. Excuse me, sorry. We also have to plan and schedule our summer retreats, which is where we will create our new board goals for the coming school year. We'll also discuss the district's new 5-year plan. Just if we want to follow the same format that we used last year. Last year we used our, I guess it was August board meeting, stayed after the board meeting for night 1, and then came back the following night. This year that would be August 16th and 17th. I'm not going to ask everybody to check your calendar now, especially because we have 2 members who aren't here, but that would be my first proposal would be if we could all do 16th and 17th. We're already here the 16th anyway, that would be the way to go. If not, we can look at other dates, but I'll send out an email to get everybody's availability on those dates. But just write those down and take a look when you have a chance at those 2 dates. Next, Sue, you were not at committee, but you had a question about available NJSBA workshops that you had asked about. And I wasn't sure exactly what you were asking, but I just want to be clear, you should be getting emails from NJSBA.
I was kind of wondering, although now I know the answer to it, is what is required of us?
Oh, okay.
You know, so as long as we have that governance, et cetera. But, the
Oh,
other
you
thing-
mean your first 3 years, the
Yes.
required ones? Oh,
Yes.
okay. So you have that answer.
Right.
Okay, good. Next is, Gwen mentioned it actually, NJSBA convention in October in Atlantic City is coming up. Mr. Gorski has volunteered to send out a flyer to everybody to see who's interested. From there, he has volunteered to take care of us and book all of our lodging and take care of everything for us. So all we have to do is reply to his email. Once he sends it, let him know that you want to be there, and he will take care of the rest for us. And I attended last year, and it is well worth the time. I was not able to attend for the full 3 days, and now it's 4. I'll probably go down Monday night, stay Tuesday, Wednesday, and then come back for work. So you don't have to stay the whole time, but go as long as you can. I mean, you can go to, I think you can get to as many as 6 or 8 trainings per day, and a lot of them are well worth it. I attended as many as I could, for sure. And I know Mr. Januzzi is interested in possibly presenting something as well, so.
Yeah, so we actually didn't file any, get onto the agenda, but I think in the future, it might be a reasonable thing for us to do so that we can demonstrate some of the leadership that we have in the district.
And the last thing, Mr. Januzzi, is something that you know a little bit more about, and that is the delegate assembly, which is taking place on Saturday, December 2nd. They have a virtual option, so you do not have to leave your house. And the reason that this is especially important for many of us on this board is that this is something that's required in order to become a certified board member. And many of us, if you do attend convention in October, this would probably be the last piece, would be to vote at a delegate assembly. So it's Saturday, December 2nd, sometime in the morning, I know that you said, and you can do it from home.
Correct. For those of you who want to attend in person, I think it's down in Trenton. This is the NJSBA Delegate Assembly, so just to clear up what we're talking about. As Mike mentioned, for board member certification, they require both attendance at convention and attendance at, you don't necessarily have to vote, but just attend and participate in the delegate assembly. So I think this is something that all districts that are part of this NJSBA have an opportunity to do, and each district does get a vote. This year we won't be exercising ours. And I think it's just important for us to participate to the extent that we possibly can in all of these great, resources that we have that are, all paid for. So by all means, let's get the maximum value out of it.
That's all I have for governance.
Awesome. Any questions for Mike on governance? Nice job. Okay, moving on to human resources, I'll try and be brief. We talked about 4 different topics. The first one had to do with open positions and transfers, and the overall hiring strategy that's expected there. You saw a number of administrative transfers on the June agenda. You see even more on this agenda, as well as new positions that are being hired. So that's something that the committee continues to monitor and work with the administration on. Our goals are, again, to increase longevity to the extent that we can and continue to make the district as desirable a place to be as possible, reducing some turnover, and then also to continue to staff up for all the new positions that were included in this year's budget. Second thing we talked about was the new role of assistant business administrator and grants manager. So that hiring has been completed. Christine Lee is now joining us as soon as she possibly can. She's just completing her role in her prior district before she's able to join us in full-time capacity role. And that is roughly the beginning of this year. You'll see a variety of sick and vacation day payouts, again, that are on the agenda this evening. And the last thing was there was a Board of Health issue that needed to be dealt with regarding some of the working conditions, which both Mr. Gorski and Dr. Freeman dealt with. There were some findings from that, which we shared in executive, I believe. And ultimately, it will help us continue to improve the conditions inside the district. Any questions or comments for HR? That's it. You talked everybody right out here. So the next up is operations, and I'll give a report just on Roger's behalf. The first thing that I will note is that we reviewed with Mr. Gorski presenting the investment returns and the current interest rates that are being earned on our investable assets. And for anybody who's following financial markets, the prime interest rates are continuing to increase, so they may be stabilized a little bit right now. We're on track at this point to exceed over $300,000 just in interest alone on low risk investments like CDs. And that's something that Mr. Gorski and his team will continue to pursue and hopefully continue to provide additional funding for the district. So again, these are monies that, because we have cash on the sidelines, we're not really earning any kind of return. To this point now, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, great job, Mike, on putting that to work for us, and glad that we're continuing to returns. You'll see two purchase consortium items on the agenda for this evening. The first one is Omnia Partners. This is a consortium that we actually joined several years ago, but continued participation requires the board to reauthorize it. The expectation is that we will be able to use this consortium for purchasing some very specific things like athletic program supplies and equipment that they do a very good job on. And helps us avoid unnecessary expenses and administrative effort by reducing or eliminating the need for us to go. So that is being recommended for board approval by the committee with no fees associated with the membership. The second purchase consortium is Educational Data Services. This one does have a fee. It's about $8,000 annually, but it has the opportunity to save us many, many times that amount of money in terms of reducing the cost for things that we're already purchasing, which includes basically all school supplies and equipment. Again, keeping prices down, keeping down our administrative time and efforts, and eliminating the need for us to go ahead and bid. So again, that's being recommended by committee and is on the agenda tonight for approval. The last thing we talked about had to do with hazardous waste abatement, or hazardous material abatement, I should say, in Lafayette School. Which is something that was found as a part of the capital improvement project. It's not a significant expense. It looks like it's just around $7,500. The committee reviewed the proposal that Mr. Gorski recommended, and subsequently also recommended it for board approval. So also on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And with that, any questions? Try. Okay. I have 3 different points of reference here for all of these different meetings. So the last I'll give on Lisa's behalf for extracurricular activities. And the committee members actually had the opportunity to sit and reflect on what we've learned so far in terms of our discussions with Mr. Smith and the administration, and really couple us around a few different very specific goals. The first one has to do with some general comments around program administration, how we review the success of the programs that we have, whether that's through satisfaction measurement or participation, and to really start to hone in on what we think success looks like and how we can ultimately measure that and affect it into the future. We talked about some ideas around common branding, and really that had to do a little bit with the way that we present ourselves to the outside community. So not making every coach or every extracurricular program leader come up with their own logo or try to understand whether you're using Bound Red or a room that's slightly off. Make that a little bit easier. By making it easier for each of the people running these programs, it provides a more consistent perspective and experience for the outside world, and helps people just at a glance understand that yes, this really is a program that's supported by the Bound School District. And then the last thing we talked about was really helping to understand for the extracurricular sports perspective what some common needs from our coaches are, and the potential for us to develop what we were calling Coaches Council, so that we can really get everybody to the table and start to attack some of these common issues as a group. So those are the 3 things that I think for the duration between now and the end of the year, when the committee subsides, we're going to try and focus in on, see if we can make a little bit of progress. Any questions on extracurriculars? Right. Sue, there's no report for Somerset County, correct?
Nothing to report, the meeting will be happening in a couple of weeks.
I'm getting there, but bi-monthly, right, every other month?
Correct.
Yeah. At this point, we are open to the public for agenda items only. Anybody from the room? Tom, how about online?
Agenda items are open to the public.
Agenda items, please.
None that provided the necessary information for first and last name.
Okay, so we have anonymous comments?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to take those? Okay,
Okay. Why is Mela Sergo being hired as a soccer coach when Mr. Binder and Ms. Kasabian both applied for the position? The two of them have both played soccer while Anthony has not. Should we not be hiring someone that is actually qualified? What are his qualifications to coach soccer? Shouldn't he at least have some knowledge of the game or perhaps have played the game? This is a feeder for our high school program. Shouldn't we be taking this a little more seriously? Question.
noted, thanks, Tom. All right. We are up to item 6.1, approval of the minutes from June 20th, 2023. Resolved that the Broward Board of Education, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approves the minutes of the following meetings, regular and executive session from June 20th, 2023. Have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Val. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Any discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Ms. Mosin,
Yes.
Mr. Minhas. Yes. Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Bowler,
Yes.
and Mr. Janusik.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 7.1, be it resolved that the superintendent recommends for approval the resolutions as outlined in district personnel resolutions. This is 7.2. Thank you, through 7.30. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hyde. Any discussion? Hearing none, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes, with an abstention on the asterisk, double asterisk.
so noted. Thank you. Ms. Mosin,
Yes.
Mr. Minhas. Yes. Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Bowler,
Yes.
Mr. Janusik.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we actually have any resolutions to move in section 8, so I will move forward to 9.1. Be it resolved that the Mount Board of Education approves the resolutions as outlined in board action resolutions. This is 9.2 through 9.21. Have a motion?
Excuse me, Mr. Janusik.
Yes.
Just a point of correction on agenda item 9.5. The attachment and the resolution should read an agreement between Ed Data and the Bound Board of Education.
Oh. I didn't catch it.
Understood.
Didn't catch it.
Apologize for that, we didn't have time to fix that.
I appreciate you bringing it up to me now, thank you. So I believe I had asked for a motion.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Val, a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Any discussion? So I will just ask one question of Mr. Gorski. I know that one of the items that was reviewed by our auditors, and I think both of our last audit reports had to do with the administration around transfers. I noted that both item 9.17 and I think it's 9.20, yes. Were both reports of the transfers that have occurred through this budget year. So noting that this was a budget that this administration inherited, and we expected that transfers would continue. Can you please just confirm that the administration of the transfers conforms with the need for us to obtain county approval for anything over its 10% balance, right?
Yes, sir. Just for everybody's understanding, transfers that fall under 10% of the advertised appropriation line item for that specific account just require Board of Education approval. If the transfer exceeds 10% of the advertised account appropriation, then it requires County Department of Education approval. And this year, to my recollection, we have sought county approval at least twice, because as you said, there has been some swings in some of the accounts that was identified. One of the big ones was the tuition account. There was an appropriate charge of tuition to some of the federal and state grants, which left a available balance that could have been used for other programs. So it's transferred.
Thank you. So I think just important for everybody to note that with the new team that we have in place on the business administration side, some of the items that were noted in our prior financial audits should now be taken care of just because we have a new captain on that. So thank you, Mr. Gorski. Any other comments or questions on any of the items in section 9? All right, hearing none, Camille, roll call please.
And then, Mr. Junizzi, I just want to point out one quick thing. There's 2 sets of board secretary and treasurer reports in this agenda. One is for the 11 months ending May 31st, and one is the full year summary for the 12 months ended June 30, 2023.
So noted.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
Ms. Lima,
Yes.
Ms. Lucy,
Yes.
Mr. Minhas. Yes. Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Mr. Goldberg,
Yes.
and Mr. Januzzi.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are up to item number 10. This will be other matters to come before the board.
Just one thing, quickly.
I'll do this in new business.
Oh, sure, however you,
You got it.
wherever you
No,
want it,
we're just noting that we're moving forward.
wherever you want to put it, you put it there.
There you go.
Just today, 3 hours ago, the police department put on Facebook that National Night Out is coming up on August 1st. Last year at that event, we had talked to the police department about possibly putting a booth together for the district to have something out there. I don't even know what exactly we would have, but someone to sit and talk to. It sounds like something Lisa might be interested in, honestly, as community outreach. But I just want to throw it out there that they posted it on Facebook, and they gave the email address for Sergeant McCullen to get in touch with him if you want to have a booth. So it might be something to look into.
Any other new business from the committee? We are now open to the public for non-agenda items.
There are none online.
So we are now ready to move into executive session. Item number 13, be it resolved that the Mount Hope Board of Education enter executive session as allowed by NJSA 10:4-11. I believe we are under, is it 1-3?
I don't know, it's always 1-3.
Mr. Merriman?
But they need-
Which provisions are we going into executive?
This is just the here.
I believe it's 1, 3, and 7.
So only 1 and 3.
And
It's just heavy with you, sir.
it's not just it, so it's
Okay.
definitely number 7. So I'm confident in that.
Okay.
So can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
I'm gonna give the motion to Mr. Dawson, the second to Mr. Ballard. All in favor? Aye. We are currently adjourned.
You are unmuted.
All right, everybody, back to session.
Sorry.
It's okay, I got you. Item 14.1, be it resolved that the Bound Board of Education approves the resolutions as outlined in HIB cases under high school. This is 14.2 and 14.3. Have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard, second.
Second.
Ms. High, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Ms. Lima.
Yes.
Ms. Musin.
Yes.
Mr. Minhas.
Yes.
Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Janusik.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 15.1, be it resolved that the Bound Board of Education approves the resolutions as outlined in HIB cases under middle and elementary schools. This is 15.2 and 15.3. Have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard, second. Mr. Minhas, roll call, please.
Mr. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
Ms. Lima.
Abstain.
So noted, thank you. Ms. Musin.
Yes.
Mr. Minhas. Yes. Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
Mr. Janusik.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Item 16.1, be it resolved that the Bound Board of Education adjourns.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard, second.
He didn't ask for one.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening.